When we're talking leadership on this podcast and in most of the social media and posts and that I put out, we talk a lot about the humanity of leadership and basically how leadership takes so much more time with people than you expect. And it takes so much more of you to show up in ways to deal with every situation than you would expect. And when I saw some information on my next guest, I looked at his vast experience and all the topics that he talks about. We were talking just before we turned on the mic that he could handle any subject that I threw at him. He could handle at a moment's notice, which I have no doubt. But what caught my eye was a book that he wrote that he's going to be re-releasing, which I'm really excited about, which deals with frustration. And we know that this time in the year of our Lord 2025, we're all dealing with a lot of frustration. Our allostatic load is through the roof. Whether it's with politics, with our families and friends, whether it's markets that are unstable, whether it's just what is happening and what does it mean to be a leader and a person in society these days. I thought he would be a great guest. So officially, Andrew Oxley is a nationally recognized author, speaker, and executive coach. He's the founder of the Oxley Group, a training and consulting firm with a focus on bottom line results. Their clients include Farmers Insurance, Progressive Insurance, Coca-Cola Enterprises, Turner Broadcasting, the Weather Channel, Cox Communications. So, some pretty substantial heavy hitter clients. Combined, his books and programs have reached and improved the lives of tens of thousands of people. His mission is to help his clients understand and deal with the complexities that they are experiencing, returning their days and their business to a state of simplicity while accelerating their business results. The book we're talking about, he's the author of The Four Faces of Frustration, How to Turn Frustration into Delight, which is an allegory, kind of like our friend, how am I forgetting his name? You know who I'm talking about? The five dysfunctions of a
Oh, Pat Lencioni.
Pat Lencioni, right? Like
Yeah.
an allegory. Thank you. Sorry, Pat. I am so sorry. I talk about your books all the time. But anyway, Andrew, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Mark. I'm excited to be on your podcast.
Yeah. So why was the focus of frustration important to you? Why where it's from our experiences that our book titles and our focus comes from. Where did that come from?
Well, I think primarily because I was experiencing a lot of it earlier in my career. When I talk to leaders, when I talk to parents, when I talk to, just people, like you said, right? We are frustrated quite often. And those frustrations take on different forms. It could be a frustration with what somebody's doing or not doing, but it shows up in people very, very differently. And the part of the challenge I had early in my career, I made this assumption that everyone reacted to difficulty the same way I did. That when they were frustrated, they looked like I did. And see how I look when I'm frustrated is I talk about it. I want to talk about it. I want to get it on the table. Let's just talk it through. Well, that is true for a percentage of the population, and it's not true for the majority of the population, actually. And so, for at least half the population. And so what I was doing was I was doing something that worked with about half the population, which allowed me to believe that I was not the problem. That
Right.
must be them because it's working with most people. So why isn't it working with everyone? And so I started to study the ways that people react to frustration. And I came across something really amazing, and that is that it is easiest to understand someone's communication style when you observe them when they're frustrated. Because it's like we have this belief, this myth that we believe that we're at our best when things are at their worst. That is actually not true. We are usually at our worst when things are at their worst. Now, we could be at our best. I'm not saying we can't, but not normally. If we're really honest, we're not really
Hmm.
best quite often. That's when the ugly gremlins come out and we behave in manners that we walk away from the conversation thinking, do that differently next time.
That's
But
why every leadership program puts you in some kind of stressful situation so that you can mirror to yourself how you would show up in
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
situation.
So really, I come to what I do today from an operational leadership background, and everything that I teach now is because I messed it up at some point.
Mhm.
And I learned what worked. And then I've had the pleasure really and the great fortune to work with tens of thousands of leaders. And I always say you don't have to be very smart. If you can work with enough people, you get to see what works and what doesn't work. And the patterns are there, right? We just sometimes we don't want to see them because it points the finger back at ourselves about what we need to be doing differently.
Not only 95 to 99% of the time, right? So you started off by saying people react to frustration differently. So the
Yes.
first piece is actually learning people's styles, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so I'll just go through the four different faces of frustration, the way that people react to frustration. Now we have to distinguish first between anger and frustration, or angry and frustration. Everybody gets angry from time to time. I mean, maybe some people don't. I've not met anyone, but most people get angry. But three of the four styles transition through anger into frustration. One of the styles actually stays looking angry, and in fairness to them, they're not always angry.
Mm,
Sometimes they're just passionate. So we call these individuals. The four faces. If you look at the book on Amazon, you'll see it. The red face is the one I'm talking about first here, and it looks angry. And we use red because red is the color of passion. And quite often these individuals are just passionate. They're not really angry, but it comes across as heat and anger to the other three behavioral styles. It's like, my wife said to me one time, she said, "Well, why are you so angry?" I'm like, "I'm not angry." And it actually made me angry that she thought I was angry. So I thought that was probably very telling. But because I thought I was hiding it, right? But sometimes we're just passionate. We're just so passionate about what we want to have happen, and it's never happening fast enough for these individuals.
right.
So if you've ever had someone say to you, like you ask them when they want something and they say yesterday, they're probably a red.
Mhm.
They're this face that is just like it's all now, 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 drive, 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 drive,
So
right?
those are the driver people, the controller people.
Yeah,
Those are the people
controlling
who just have
personalities.
tons of energy,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
they think they're coming across at a 2 or a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10. They're actually on, on blast on 10, but they just have no awareness of that, right?
Yeah, or well, they may not, or they may and they don't care. One of the two, right? Or maybe they are aware and they're trying to moderate. But in general, that's the first one. We call it the angry, the red.
Hmm.
The passionate. I'm just going to use the kind word, which is passionate, right?
Okay.
And so when I describe that person to people, they usually already have someone in their mind. They're like, "Oh, yeah, I know someone like that, right? Or I am that person, or I'm married to that person, or they have someone already in mind." Reds are really easy to identify, right? Especially when they're frustrated. Okay, so now the other three translate through anger into frustration, and the first one we're going to talk about are the yellows, or the optimists, the happy-go-lucky people. These people have never met a stranger, and when they get frustrated, they transition through anger, and then they feel bad that they were angry, and they start telling you everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. We're going to work through this, and they start trying to put lipstick on the pig, and it's just pisses off the three other behavioral styles actually, because they're like, why do you have to make everything fine? It's not fine. Let's just deal with the problem, right? And so we call these the yellows, or the happy people, the optimists, and our face for them is the smiley face. So a lot of people know people like that, right? They know people who are they're all the eternal optimists.
Yeah, and
And
as you speak, I'm going around the Enneagram wheel and I'm picking
yeah,
types that might fit into your categories.
yeah, and there's a lot of correlation between the Enneagram and behavioral style. So the other one that's pretty easy to identify is the people who are what we call blues or analyticals, quite often engineers, accountants, detail-oriented occupations. When they become frustrated, they start asking lots of questions. Now, this causes them to be cast as the pessimist in the group. You're always talking about why it won't work, and part of the reason why they get cast as the pessimist is they're pointing out all the potholes in the road, which actually is really an important function on any team. You need someone who's paying, hey, we're going 80 miles an hour and we're hitting potholes. Maybe this isn't such a great idea. But the problem is when you get cast as the pessimist, people stop listening to you, right? So we always say for blues, or the compliance oriented individuals, what you need to do first is state your intent, because when you come up with 50 questions and 50 reasons why something won't work, and then you say, but I want it to work. People have already framed your intent for you. So just frame your intent up front. Like, I
Mhm.
want this to work, but I see some challenges. Is it okay if we talked about that? Well, now people are going to hear your questions very differently, right? So those people are actually pretty easy to identify too. The one that's hard to identify are what we call the greens or the steadies. This is actually the largest group in society. Women are slightly more statistically to be green than other than the men, slightly. They're quieter and they're not emotional. So when they're frustrated, they just stop talking, which really none of the three behavioral styles do. The blues do for a little while, but greens just stop talking. And if you ask them why they don't raise their concerns, they say, "Well, you're not listening to me anyway, so what's the
Mhm.
point?" What's frustrating about this is when whatever you're trying to do doesn't work, they say, "Well, I knew that wasn't going to work." You're like, "Well, why didn't you tell me?" And they'll say, "Well, I tried, but you weren't listening." Right? So if I'm a talker, when I've got a problem, when I'm frustrated, and I'm dealing with a green who is a non-emotional, I'm just going to shut down and do whatever you want me to do. It looks to me like they're not frustrated because they're just being compliant with what I want. But they're a little Mount Everest or like a little volcano, working up to eruption. And when you piss a green off for long enough, uh, they erupt. And they
Mhm.
look like a red for a very short period of time, but then they feel guilty that they got mad and they go back to.
Because anger is the only way they actually can overcome that reserve.
Right, right. So when they've had enough, they erupt. And here's what happens is when that happens, we react like all I said was, and we state the last thing we said, and here's how you know they're agreeing, because they say, it's not about that. It's about all this stuff that's been happening. And you're like, what the heck? I don't even remember all that stuff. But
Mhm.
they do. They have long memories. So you get the red, yellow, green, and blue, very different approaches. So the first thing that we need to recognize as leaders is you're not just one. This is an oversimplification, right? You're
Right.
more than just a color or a style, communication style, but all systems are broken, but some are useful. Like the Enneagram's very useful. It doesn't explain everything, but it explains a lot. It helps you understand people, right? And so this system, first I got to understand, oh, okay, how do I respond under stress? Now, before you think you know, go ask someone who knows you well, because they may think, like I didn't think I'm a red yellow. I didn't think I had very much red in me. I've since found out I have a lot, um, from various people and being assessed. And so, make sure you know what you are first. And then what'll happen is, okay, so when I'm stressed, when I think I'm hiding it, I'm probably not. And I'm doing things that will work with some people, but won't work with others. And then you got to figure out, well, how do the people I want to build a relationship with, how do they respond under stress? And then you have to have some strategies to act differently with those people. And the good thing about this stuff is it's not even that hard to do. It just takes a little bit of awareness and understanding.
And it takes time to you say it's not a lot of work, but it's work a lot of people don't feel they have the time to do,
Well,
is to
yes.
contemplate, how am I showing up? How am I showing up to other people? How are people interpreting my communication style? And then asking, right? I just did a bunch of 360s on a bunch of executives in an organization. And a lot of it was a surprise and a lot of it wasn't a surprise, but the few things that they didn't know were game changers for them.
Yeah, yeah, always, always. So, because we all have blind spots. So, one of our roles as coaches is a blind spot remover. It's like I had to tell somebody literally today, okay, I know you believe that to be true, but it's not. Like he actually stated something that was uh, uh, a belief he had,
Mm-hmm.
and it was in part of a long response he had to a question. And I said, "Can I just stop you there? You realize what you just said is not true." And I know you believe it is. And until we address the beliefs that underpin people's actions, then we can't we try to coach people on behaviors, but the beliefs generate the actions, not the other way around. So once I understand how I'm coming across to people, which is hard, right? Somebody asked me a question the other day, and something you could ask yourselves, those people in your audience, is like, what's it like to be on the other side of you? Like, what's it like dealing with you? And when I was first asked that question, I said, I'm wonderful. And they looked at me and they said, I know you think so. And we got to have people in our lives that are willing to speak the truth to us with love. And when people speak that to us, not like that are really care about us and want us to get better, when they do that, if we argue with them, they'll just stop talking to us. They'll just stop telling us. It's like it's not worth it, you know. So there's only three words you ever need to share when someone gives you some advice or some insight, and that's tell me more.
Mhm.
Not, well, you don't understand because, tell me more. Now, it doesn't mean they're right. It doesn't mean you have to accept their advice. You just have to listen and try to understand their perspective. And maybe you decide, they don't know what they're talking about. Okay, maybe they don't, but you'll never know unless you listen really well.
Makes sense. Can we go around that the four
Yeah.
colors again, but this time just do succinctly tell me the pitfall. We talked about the pitfalls, but kind of succinctly say the pitfalls of the color and then the healthy version of the color.
Yeah,
Because I was thinking as you went around with the four colors, every single one of those people is needed in an organization to move it forward. So can you
correct.
talk about that?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about that, by the way, because sometimes a red will be like, if I just had a bunch of reds, we'd take the mountain, and no, you wouldn't. There'd be blood on the floor. You'll argue about everything. So you need a mixture of these. The mixture creates the friction that allows the team to move forward, and without friction, there's no movement. Too much friction, the team gums up, right? So the strengths of a red are that they are driven. They're very direct. You never have to wonder what they feel about stuff. They've got a motor that never stops, right? They're about getting to the top of the hill fast. It might be the wrong hill, but they don't care. They're like, okay, so that's the hill we want, and they'll go take that hill. So that's you need people who just they're never satisfied, want to move
Yeah, they
fast.
do the work of three, four people, right? Yeah.
Quite often. Sometimes they create work for three or four people, which is the downside, right? Because, in the process of getting up the hill fast, they will injure people. It is not their intention. They'll hurt people's feelings. They'll say things they probably shouldn't say. They have sometimes a lack of attention to detail. They don't pay attention to what could go wrong because they're like, what could possibly go wrong? They believe they're more powerful than the environment. So they're just going to move fast and go, right? So a lot of times, and by the way, reds are more likely to be in leadership positions than any other behavioral style. Please do not interpret this that they make better leaders. They do not necessarily. That's a skill issue, right? But they like to be in charge. So you will see them in charge, whether they actually are in charge. Like you may have a red that works for you and you feel like you work for them because
Right.
they're telling you what to do all the time. You're like, I am the boss here. But they're like, yeah, but you're not moving fast enough. So I'm going to tell you what you need to do.
It's
Uh,
interesting. Often when I coach people who I would consider reds, I would say, look, your personality, like the way you show up, you should be CEO, right? Like, but you're not. So you need to decide, are you going to go start your own thing and become CEO? And then you can be red all you want. You'll run into problems there also.
of course.
But but if you're going to be on a leadership team reporting to a CEO, there's some modifications we need to make here. Now,
That's
and you need to choose.
Yeah, that's exactly right, right? So there's no such thing as a strength without a weakness. And I want to come back and talk about the Peter principle at the end of this if we have time. But let's go around to the yellow. Yellows also like to move fast. They want to get to the top of the hill, but they want to have some fun and meet some people and laugh and have a good time. And they're awesome at building like networks of
Mhm.
people and you just feel good around these people. You're like, man, they're just so much fun. I always say the party never really starts until the yellows arrive. I mean, the Reds think it starts when they arrive because they tell people to have fun, but it really starts when the yellows arrive because they're like a little party in a box. You pop out, no, they pop out, and a party erupts. So they're great at building teams and bringing people together and making people feel good, and they're good in front of people. The downside is that they have a sincere lack of attention to detail, which they can usually get away with it early in their career, but after a while, it might reach up and bite them.
Hmm.
They're not good at keeping schedules. They don't tend to be on time, but they can
But so
convince
what you're
you.
saying is they generally have ADD.
Yeah, I think they're definitely the most medicated group in school. Yes, without question. It's like the Disney movie where the character's like squirrel. That's a yellow, right? So they can move fast. They think fast. They have to talk and think at the same. Sorry, they have to talk it out to think it out. Like they do both at the same time. So do Reds, by the way. Um, but greens and blues don't. They like to think before they talk, which causes issues when you're trying to solve a problem. Um, so so that's the downside of the yellows is that they can be well, the other downside is sometimes they make jokes about other people that are really funny to them,
Hmm.
but not as funny to the person who was made fun of, right? And they don't recognize that I shouldn't have said that, maybe. Um, okay, so the greens, by the way, greens are the backbone of any organization. If you have an employee who's been with you for some time, uh, and is very loyal, probably a green. Greens stick around. They're not big on change. Uh, they like to do things that are somewhat repetitive quite often. Um, and they don't get bored with it, but they do it really well. And they're good at building relationships with people. Like, whereas yellows know like 50 people, greens will know five, but they know them like everything about them. They have deep relationships. They know everything that's going on in an organization. If you want to know what's going on in your company, go find a green. They know. They really know. They know where all the dead bodies are buried. The Reds do too, but that's because they buried them. But the um, so that's the greens are great people. They're just the term salt of the earth. That's a green, right? Just the salt of good people, right? The downside of a is that they don't like conflict.
Right.
So they're not attracted to leadership positions quite often, even though they would make amazing leaders. But they see the model of the red or the red yellow or the red blue as a leader. I'm like, I can't lead that way. So they think they're not a leader. I'm like, leadership is not a color. It's somebody who's able to take people from somewhere to somewhere,
Mm.
right? So greens are like to avoid conflict, and so they 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 tend to just give in, and they seem docile to the other behavioral styles. Like you don't really care, and they do care. They care deeply. They just find it hard to be noticed in a crowd quite often.
Okay.
Um, and then blues, their strength is their ability to analyze a situation till it's dead. They can analyze anything. They can pick it apart and see what's right, what's wrong, and build a plan and stuff. The downside is they get into paralysis by analysis sometimes, and they just analyze stuff so much, and they don't take action. Blues build a project plan by identifying how many steps they are, how long is every step going to take, and then they add up the steps, and that's how long the project's going to take, which sounds very logical, but not the way the other behavioral styles do it. Specifically, reds and yellows, they just decide how long the project should take, and then they decide the plan to meet the desired timeline. That's not what blues do. And so there's this, they get blamed sometimes for not having a sense of urgency. So, great analyzers, but with all these things, if you think about it, the strength becomes a weakness if it's not managed properly. So, Malcolm Gladwell, not Malcolm Gladwell, sorry, Marshall Goldsmith had a great book where it said, "What got you here won't get you there." And in that book, he said, the problem with leaders as they progress, and all of us, as we progress and we become successful, is we start believing that I am successful because of the things I do. And you got to divide what you do into two categories: the things I do that help me be successful, and the things I do that I am successful in spite of. And the in spite
Good.
ofs, those are the things that will trip you up. Um, so a red might think I am successful because I'm so driven. And I'm like, okay, at times you are successful because of that. In times you're successful in spite of the way you come across.
Right.
So if you just moderated this in these types of situations, you'll be even more successful. And that's the hard thing to get your mind around as you look at yourself, because I can't see the difference. I see them. equally,
Right.
you know?
This, this is the Rising Leader podcast, right? Turning high achievers into effective leaders. It's exactly what you're saying is what got you here is not necessarily what's going to get you in there. It might hold you back, right? So
Yeah.
so again, expanding your range, growing your capabilities I would say that none of us are any Enneagram type or disc type or color type in this matter. We all have the range of it, and we can work on kind of seeping into the others, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about rising leaders, so one of the beliefs that a rising leader quite often has is that, if you want to do something done right, you got to do it yourself, and that is a belief that will generate a lack of ability to trust and delegate as you grow a team, right? So now the problem with limiting beliefs is there's always evidence that they're true. I'm like, well, you don't understand. When I trust people, they screw up. I'm like, okay, that's the definition of a limiting belief. There is evidence that it is true, but is it helpful for me to believe that I can't trust people? Well, no, it's not helpful. Well, then like why would I hold on to that belief? Now you can't just say I can trust people. That's like just living in, I don't know, it's the Skittles universe, like
Right.
um I gotta say, well, what would an empowering belief about that be for a rising leader? It would be like, you know, um, people can be trusted, but sometimes even well-intentioned people go astray for a variety of reasons. I need to make sure that the people that I am delegating things to have an adequate skill and ability before I turn them loose. That's an empowering belief. Because now an empowering belief directs you at what you need to do differently. It doesn't just you don't just say the world is the way you want it to be and believe that's going to change the world.
Right. And this is in your work also, but clarity of vision, like all the communication, everything for that accountability, for that your ability to trust is on them, but also on you and how you foster them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I often say to leaders, if you're not following up on the things you've asked people to do, then don't even bother asking them. I mean, because only one of two things can possibly happen. Either they did it and you should be positively reinforcing it, or they didn't do it and you missed it, but you're going to catch it at some point. So, follow up is actually an incredibly important skill. You got to do it a very specific way, but that's not micromanaging. I think micromanaging has sort of become this bludgeon that we use against leaders so that they don't follow up on the things we're supposed to be doing. Micromanaging is bad, but it's not follow up. That's not micromanaging.
Right, right. Follow. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
definitely.
right.
Let's call it communication. Let's
Yeah,
just call it
exactly.
open and continuous communication. That's great. Can I ask you one more thing? But like I love this whole exploration of how we deal with conflict, with frustration, and how we show up. Everything you want to know about your future spouse. Just have someone bring the wrong dinner to the table and see how they treat the wait person. You'll know what your life is going to look like, right? There's something else you talked about in one of your talks, and I thought it was just really cool, is that uh, we are someone in our people's story. As a leader, we
Yeah.
have a role in people's story. And you talk about being the hero, the villain, or the guide for your employees' lives. And if you would just take a couple minutes to go through your thoughts on that, I thought that was really perspective shifting.
Yeah, and so once again, this is another model. Like all of our leadership stuff, what we try to do is to try to create models that explain complex things that so you can come back to it. You can come back to the colors. You can come back to these three roles of a leader, and so the idea is that when your employees arrive home at the end of the day, someone says to them, "How was your day?" And they usually say one of three things, like, you know. They talk about what went well, they talk about what went badly, or they say, same crap, different day. But you as their boss is present, you're present in that story. And the question is, what role are you playing in that story? And is it the role you want to play? And there's three roles we see people playing. The first one is the role of the villain. And unlike in like the movies, villains bosses aren't inherently evil. They're good people who feel like I just don't know how to hold people accountable. Like sometimes you just got to kick people in the butt, don't you? And so they can become aggressive rather than assertive in the way that they manage their people, and they because they don't know what else to do. And so I've never actually met anyone who self-identifies as the villain, but every group I work with has met one. So I'm pretty sure they're out there. And I think if we were being real, we'd say you don't occupy a role all day. I
Or
mean,
to different people. Like, they're villain to some people and they're not to others.
yes, yeah, and I found we take on the villain role for one of two reasons. Sometimes we're cast as the villain by our employees that don't want to take responsibility, and so they blame us. And I've actually come to believe we have some culpability in that, even when that happens. The second time is that when we take on the role, either subconsciously or consciously choose to take on the role because I just don't know what else to do, and I've had it. And usually it's because we've spent too long in the hero role, and the hero role is different than the villain role. The hero role is a very supportive, kind boss who tries to help people, excuses things sometimes maybe that they shouldn't excuse, doesn't necessarily hold people accountable for things, maybe doesn't make people do everything they should be doing because they feel bad for their people, doesn't delegate because people are already overmatched. I mean, if you've got anybody on your staff that they're not doing 100% of their role and they've been in the role for some time, you are probably being a hero boss to that person. And if I pick up 5% from this person and 5% from this person and 5%, well, now I got 100% of my job and I've got like five people I'm doing 5% of their job. And that's if it's just 5%. So no wonder I'm working so many hours. I'm doing other people's jobs for them. So this is the hero, right? Now, the great thing about the hero is the employee loves the hero. The problem with being the hero in your employee story is everybody wants to be the hero of their own story. They want to go home and tell their spouse, their significant other, you know what I did today? You know what decisions I made? No one wants to go home and say, well, I didn't really make any decisions. I mean, I had an idea, but my boss sort of took it away from me, shined it up and gave it back to me. And it wasn't really my idea anymore. It was their idea. And I did it, but I don't really feel any ownership for it. And they may not use those exact words, but that's the way they feel. Right. So both these roles, the hero and the villain, are self-limiting. You are necessary. The guide is different, and everybody thinks they're the guide. By the way, when I first tell everything, well, I'm probably mostly guide. I'm like, I don't think you are, because being the guide is an ideal. It's something that we strive for, but you can't be in the guide. I shouldn't say you can't. Very few people are going to be in guide mode all day. It's an ideal we would strive for, where we turn up to help people be their best. And we engage with them, and we're not like overly aggressive, and we're not overly excusing. The best boss that anyone I've ever talked to has ever had was a guide. They were tough, but they believed in them. They pushed them and they helped them. They did both. That's the guide, right? So what happens sometimes is we're in guide mode for a little with these people, and then we're maybe the villain over here for a little bit. Then we try to be the hero to people and to help people, and we get fed up and we flip over into villain mode. And I had somebody ask me one time and say, well, don't you just have to be the villain sometimes? I mean, don't you just have to kick people in the butt? And I'm like, well, when they actually, I knew they didn't, but I didn't know how to explain it to them at the time. And the good thing about what we do is I get to go back and ponder these
Yeah.
questions.
Don't you have to beat your kids sometimes?
That's right. And I thought that I tell this story quite often. When my kids were young, Tracy left me alone with the children. We have four, and for some reason, she thought I was capable of handling all that. And so I remember, like they were all under seven at the time, and I remember, and maybe your audience has never lost their cool with their kids, but I was just so upset with them. Now, what they could possibly have done under seven, I don't know. But I could give you all sorts of excuses for my bad behavior. If you went
Most of us
back,
are parents. We all know.
if I could just go back and say, they're going to do some really bad crap in a few years, so you shouldn't really be that upset about this. But I remember, the kids' eyes were like saucers looking at me, and I was like, if you could go back in a time machine and say, did you have to act that way? I would have said, of course I did. Don't you understand? But now, with all the experience I have, I'm like, no, I didn't have to act that way. And this is the important thing. I just didn't know how not to. Not knowing how not to do something doesn't mean that there's not a way. It just means you can't live your life in reverse. Right? You can't go back. You got to live forward. Sometimes we act badly in situations, and you say, okay, so what that tells me is there's something I need to learn. That is a area I need to grow in as a leader.
Beautiful. So I'm just curious, did your kids forgiven you for that day?
Yeah.
Or are
Yeah.
they all in
And-
therapy talking about,
yeah. They're still in therapy.
oh, you're the villain of that story?
I'm not sure that they actually remember it the way I do. Well, I mean, I'm sure they remember me getting upset with them from time to time, but no, they don't think they really remember it. I remember it because I remember even it was happening. And this is so often when we're talking to employees, like I knew I was behaving badly, but I felt justified
Hmm.
in the bad behavior. I was not justified in the bad behavior. I had reasons. Don't get me wrong. You're sleep deprived when you have young
Yeah,
kids, and but I go back now. I'm like, you know what? I probably could have. If I'd just known what they were going to do later in life, I would have been so much more chill about what they were doing at that time. Because
100%. Then if you know that they're the ones who are going to be in charge of your decisions about you later on, we're really going to be nice to them. I'm getting to that point. I'm like, oh wait, these are the. I'm meeting my daughter-in-laws for the first time as and I'm like, these are the women who are going to be taking care of me. I'm going to be nice to them because I know my sons aren't. So
that's historically the way it goes, isn't it? Yeah.
it's hilarious. This was so delightful. I really am. I'm so glad you came on the show, Andrew. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be on with you. Thank you for being such a great host. I appreciate it.
That's great. If people want more of you, where can they find you?
Two places. So if you go to Amazon, you can order the book, The Four Faces of Frustration by Andrew Oxley. Actually happen to be my mother's favorite author, only because none of my other siblings have written a book. But yes, so that book is available on Amazon, or if you go to transformingresults.com, we actually have a live leadership workshop we do. It's a 90-minute workshop where we go through a lot of these models and we help leaders create a blueprint for how to shift from where they are to where they'd like to be.
Yeah, that 90-minute course on your website looks amazing. So we're going to put all the links in those show notes, so you don't have to remember anything Andrew said about where to find them, because you can just click on the show notes and find them. So again, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Mark. I wish you all the best.
To everybody else, I hope this was valuable use of your time. I love you a ton. Have a great rest of the day.